Welcome back to Incremental, the Continuous Improvement Podcast. This is our practice edition where we talk about improvements we made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. I am Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing.
And I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
You got a quote for us?
I do, and I'm I'm laughing now based on our discussion prior to turning this on. Don't confuse motion for progress. Unknown.
Yeah.
Did you improve anything this week?
No.
Yeah.
Did you?
No.
I have a couple actually,
but also I think I'm laughing about this quote because like sometimes doing a bunch of stuff is just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like we are making progress even though we didn't change much this week.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, it was like making parts that need to be shipped, so that's pretty good.
And we were like contemplating reorganizing our entire tool management system, but that's not a good bullet point.
Yeah,
or it's not completed in any way.
No, but there's still progress there.
Yeah,
right. So the reason this jumped out to me when I heard the quote, is I've really been noticing like there again and again in these books. And I feel like the cool thing about making this podcast, maybe, hopefully, is that people are along for the ride of us learning about lean.
Right.
I think we've both read quite a few books on the topic. And yet every single time I reread them, I'm like, oh, that's what this means. Every single time. Right. So like, you know, production, like rationalize your production for a long time. I was like, I know all of those words. I have no idea what they mean by this.
They could be in any order and it wouldn't mean anything else.
Yeah, and it kind of just clicked at some point. I was like, oh, this is what that means. So again and again, they've said, you know, without standardization, without standard work, there is no improvement, right? And I'm kind of like, well, I actually know that that's not true because I'm improving things and we don't have standard work. But like more and more, I just really see that on a team of one, you can make progress because you're doing it the same every time.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. Or at least you have like a common thread.
Yeah. And you're there to observe every time.
Yeah.
Because you're the only one doing it. And I just see, so like you said this last episode, but basically like making a bad system lets you, right? Like it forces you to sort of experience the problem.
Yeah.
And so that is basically standardizing work, right? And so without, like in a lab, if you were to conduct a scientific experiment, you can't get published if you're just like, yeah, we did a little different every time, but every time was a little better. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't count at all. Sorry. Doesn't count because you can't actually really derive much from that.
Right.
Now, I don't know how to square that with like PDCA loops, and you should try a lot of things fast.
Well, I think the idea is each one of those is a small paper that you submit.
And becomes a new standard, but I could also imagine sort of offlining those of being like, let's try a bunch of things today, and then we'll settle on a new standard.
Yeah.
But like, I just see, even with myself, like the second you sort of document, I mean, I feel like we've both done this. You're working in some aspect of the shop. You're like, okay, wait, what are we doing now? And you write it out. You're like, oh, that's horrible. Like easy fix here, right? The second you actually lay it out. But when you're sort of in this quantified ambiguity state, you just can't do much from there that's useful.
Yeah. And I often find that like, and we deal with this a lot because we're, you know, in the toddler crawling phase of this whole thing. Yeah. If that, maybe we're just learning how to sit up. That oftentimes like you write out your SOP or whatever, and maybe it's not that bad, but really what it ends up pointing out is that like you don't actually have a good way to follow an SOP yet. Right. Right. Like maybe like the theoretical path that you're going to follow, you've actually thought through and is decent. But like you have zero way of like maintaining the standard. Yeah. And so that becomes the actual project. Is being like, okay, so this is what we all do, but actually this is what we all do. how are we going to actually make sure that we all do this?
Yeah. And like just Sam and I in a small shop.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of differences between the way I do things and the way he does things. And I'm sure we both do certain things better and worse. Yeah. And really a mix of the two would be great. But right now there's no mechanism for even confronting the fact that we do things slightly differently.
Yeah. Have you continued with Toyota Kata the last couple weeks?
No.
So I'm into the section on the coaching kata.
Okay.
So, and this is sort of the Toyota kata is like how you go about actually making the improvements. The coaching kata is like, on the surface, it's about how you teach people to make the improvements.
Okay.
But the really cool thing was it, went through some like in-depth examples. Or what I've read so far, they went through one in-depth example. And the example was in a car assembly line where they're like screwing a body panel onto the inside of a door and getting all these stripped studs. And like just bringing this back to what you were just talking about variability, like the difference in this particular example was that like one person like spun the nut driver before they seated the nut. The other person seated the nut, then spun the nut driver. That little differentiation in a system as refined as that made a big deal. Like obviously in my shop, we're far, far from anything like that, but still having a way to even get to the point of being like, okay, what's the variable here that has changed between these two?
Yeah. Like
this person is making 0 scrap. This person is making 30% scrap.
Right.
If you don't have at least some outline of what your system is, it's just chaos, and you're like, well, I don't know.
Talk to each other.
Yeah.
Try to figure it. Yeah,
exactly. Everything's different.
Yeah. I have a funny example of this in the shop, where there's no standard and it normally works because of like tradition or tribal knowledge or whatever.
Common sense.
Yeah. So we've had this is interesting from a number of reasons, but probably belonged in last episode. We had a very large order that was sort of rushed, and they were kind of like, just tell us what you can ship and ship it. So it basically emptied us out.
Yeah.
Largely. And so we've had to do these very small batches of color to bring back which is kind of interesting that to respond to demand actually quickly, we needed to go to smaller parts, smaller batch sizes, which I was like, yeah, that's kind of tickles me. And so that's what we've done. And we don't have a designated system at all for how Kanban travels with the batches. And so the whole paint department is a complete mess of like Kanban floating around that are not, because we broke the system, right? We were doing like racks of 4. And so there were sort of 4 places that we have all settled on, like resting the Kanban that go with these racks, right? Like,
oh, interesting.
But there isn't a way to put a Kanban on 1 rack or 2 racks. And so now they're just like stacked, and then you have to be like, oh wait, I'm meant to paint how many? And then like they've come out of the oven, and some of them are here, some of them are there. I'm like, are those going into the oven? Are they coming out of the, like, it's chaos. Because we've developed a system and no one's really codified what the system is, and so it wasn't even clear that we were breaking a system, right? Yeah. We were just like muddling along.
And now there's 2 here.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, that will work. And I just think if we sat down to develop a system, it would be very clear, A, that we were breaking it. So, of course, there's going to be some level of chaos.
Yeah.
And maybe we should think about how we want to break this properly. Anyway, it's just like there's no documentation on any of it. Right. Something I have been thinking about is that each station should have production, should have QC, and should have a shipping area. Every single station ships stuff. Maybe it's to the next work step, maybe not, but there is not an explicit, in my shop, there's not an explicit like, okay, this is shipping from the machining department to the paint department. How do we ship them? Do we ship them in this kind of bin? Do we ship them in that kind of bin? Do we ship them in quantities of 40? Do we ship them in quantities of 50? Like, it is just something that happens, right? And like, it happens fine. And like, obviously this is what Kanban does, but
sure,
there isn't an explicit step or area where things get packaged. And I think it would
packaged?
Like, just they need to move somehow. How do they get moved?
Wait, so how do you do it now? I've been imagining this beautiful system of Kanbans and bins in your shop.
Yeah, it is. And it works like day to day. You go in there and you're like, oh, wow, cool. But it's not explicit and it's not codified. And so the second we try to do something else, it's like, oh, how were we doing it? I just did this. Okay, well, I don't know. It's just very ambiguous. And I think, like we were talking about missing quality control, right? And the issues that causes. Similarly, everyone is shipping product to a customer. That might be an internal customer. That might be an external customer. Yeah. And an internal customer should be respected similarly, but I think we don't. Yeah. Because it's like, here's the problem I've been running into is that sometimes Kanban gets left behind. But we don't do that when we ship to a customer because you're like, where's the packing slip? This goes in the box. But somehow when it's an internal customer, it's like, okay, those are going there. I'll go put them over there. Yeah. And then you come over and you're like, I don't know what color I meant to paint these. And there's no explicit, like, we are passing this to the next step. What are all the things that need to travel with the part? Yeah. Kind of thing.
I think that's similar to what we're dealing with that we were talking about last episode with wanting to have our work orders travel. And we've been having this silly thing where it's like, and we've all noted it, where a program needs a tweak. Mm-hmm. So someone walks over and says, this needs a tweak. I'm like, okay, I'll do the tweak. I do the tweak. I re-upload the file. Mm-hmm. And no one knows that it's re-uploaded. And so then I have to be like, oh, hey, it's ready.
Interesting.
And we're like, how do we deal with this? And, maybe it is literally just being like, you got to carry the slip over here. I bring the slip back, and then when the slip's there, you know that it's good to go, kind of a thing.
Right. Or a manual and-on. It could even be a piece of paper. But this all gets back to SOPs also, right? It's like, this is how we do this thing. Yeah. Instead of like, we all collaborate beautifully. Yeah. Which feels like the thing that everyone kind of encourages and praises is like good teamwork and collaboration. And those are all often sort of like really relying on people doing a good job instead of building systems together.
Well, also I think like ideally good teamwork and collaboration builds a good system. Like if you integrate it into this.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think as we're both discovering.
Right.
that, one does not beget the other automatically.
Yes, not at all.
Maybe we should go over a couple improvements.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go over the one that I have. Great. We've been running into this issue loading. So machining weeds on the R450 machine from Brother. Mm-hmm. The control is at the front of the machine. You load tools at the side of the machine. Mm-hmm. So we have our workstation computers at the front of the machine. Okay. But you can't see that screen that has your tool list on it at the side of the machine. Oh. We have some thoughts about how to handle this ongoing. Okay. Part of it is going to be that I think when we make these setup tool carts, they'll have pockets in the top of the cart that are numbered. Mm-hmm. So that basically you're looking at your tool list when you build this out, and then you just take it over and swap the numbers.
That makes sense.
But for the moment, we moved our workstation at the R450 to the other side of the machine. Okay. Next to the control, and kind of like back a little ways offset so that you can swing the monitor to the side and at least see it. It's a little weird because like you can't use the mouse. Anyway, it's not ideal by any stretch, but it was better than walking back and forth constantly.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think that there's many things that the tool cart or the setup cart will fix. That's one small piece, I think.
That's cool. Yeah, in contemplating the R450 or the R650, I was kind of like, it's so nice that the 650 has the control next to the side door. Yeah. But then I was talking to Andrew, and he was like, oh man, yeah, it's a bummer because it's at the side door. And I was like, wait, what? Because I guess like it is true that you would maybe want it over there for loading parts and proving things out.
Yep.
potentially
loading tools. You mean
loading? Yeah. But in day-to-day, like most of the use is sort of like calling up program or
at the front.
Yeah. So then I don't know. He was saying it would just be really nice if you had a feed hold and a like over what's it called, like feed rate and rapids override.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And that would kind of get you where you need to be.
I
don't know.
That really would do like basically all of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And maybe a manual ATC button to just put the spindle up and down.
Oh, God. So you have to... Oh, so you just leave it up and go to the different pockets you need?
Yeah.
Is there a button to move through them?
Yeah. Yeah, you can cycle through the pockets at the side.
Yeah, that would be kind of sadistic if they did that.
And there's an e-stop there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I have a few. I've started doing this thing that I can't decide if it's good or bad, but I'm doing it. And it's been good. No. Which is, so there's sort of like, we're running a pneumatic vise in the CNC. And there's sort of a step of programming the part, running it manually, where we just manually put aluminum onto it, flip it into Op2.
New product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the stage of sort of programming the gripper to run it fully automatically. It's really a hassle in that middle when you're manually loading it, because it's like it doesn't necessarily open and close and come to the door, and then Op2 you sort of have to like tweak the input the M code to close the vise while sort of pressing down on the part if it needs a seating, like some seating force, like while it's closing on Op2.
Mine closes if you just hit reset because of the type
yours
of
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence about which type is
better. Yeah.
Mine is safer, but more annoying. Anyway, real hassle. So what I started doing is using manual NC. So I've written full programs at the beginning of and end of the program, including bringing in the pusher tool I have in there to come push it into the vise for Op2 and close.
Yeah.
So like that's just manually NC, like manual pass-through
in the
program, coming to the door, opening, closing, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. And
so then I can keep tweaking the program, but I still get all of the sort of convenience. And it's been really nice. I don't know why I wasn't doing that previously.
I wonder if you should just make a generic sub-program call.
Oh, that's a thought.
That has all of that stuff
that's
that you use while like a proof out mode.
Right. So the other thing it does is calls the Op2 program as before the M30 or G30, M30. M30. I just have I have a manual pass through G68P whatever with an M00 before it, so you can't. I crashed the machine early on by chaining together two programs and then forgot I chained them.
Oof.
Yeah, and it like ran over to the vise after running something on the fourth, and I had a massive like weldment in the vise at the time instead of a tiny block of aluminum, and it went bam. And I had guests. I was giving a shop tour.
Oh my god,
it was very exciting. Anyway, so I learned my lesson. Yeah, M00, and then it calls the sub, and then in the sub I have the M99 to go back to
the end,
the beginning of the first program. So it just loops, and you just stand at the machine, open and close the doors. It's very convenient, and the nicest part is it posts directly out of Fusion like that. I don't need to go make any tweaks. So that's been really nice. Sort of opens the door to like a convenient middle.
Yeah.
So I'll probably run a bunch of parts without, like you had suggested, run a bunch of inventory without programming a gripper, just
to get it out there.
And make sure I'm happy with how it's machining and everything else, and the block size and everything.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so that was a good one. I updated some sewing jigs. So as I mentioned, Sam is out for the week on vacation, and so he's sort of been badgering me about updating a sewing jig, and I'm like, yeah, for sure, absolutely, and then haven't gotten to it. And then I was running the sewing machine, and I'm like, this thing is abysmal. It just like there's a lot of problems with it. It makes good stuff, but it's annoying to use, and it could be better in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Anyway, So I made those updates. There's something very visceral about experiencing the problem yourself.
The go and see. I guess that's
it gets it right to the top of the list. And just having to do it like over and over. So
yeah,
I guess it's nice having tolerant employees, but also creates problems that kind of persist.
It really does.
And then the other one, getting back to the yellow tags. That we're using at the CNC to sort of flag any potential problems. I updated our 1/8 inch end mill from a collet to a shrink fit. Definitely noticeable results. In the sound of the cut, in the blending. Without tweaks. Like it's definitely, I don't know,
It's better.
It's better. I was sort of thinking about it. If you have like, 1.5 thou chip per tooth, and then you have 5/10 of run out. That's not an insignificant percentage.
It's massive
difference between like one tooth that's doing most of the work and the others that are kind of
along for the ride.
And then you're cutting with one flute, which affects tool wear and it affects vibration. So that is great, and that's all I got.
Cool. Right on. I don't have anything else.
Nice.
But we can talk about some stuff. One thing I had for the last episode was just how hard it is to make these big improvements. Just to make the time is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think especially when there's pressure to make things, pressure to continue production.
Right.
And these big chunks especially, it's just like, how are we going to fit this in? It's very, very challenging.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to me. Like, I've definitely been feeling that generally, but especially lately because demand has increased substantially, and which is typical for third quarter or fourth quarter. And then paired with Sam being out of town and launching a new product, it's like, there's just no time to make improvements unless something else is going to fall behind.
Yeah.
And it's pretty frustrating because I think I've gotten better at like seeing waste, which is a goal, but then you're kind of like staring in the face of, this is so bad. The other thing I've been thinking about is sort of like, as a small business, you face sort of like these big hurdles in that making a hire is a huge percentage change in your available like man hours to the business and in your payroll. Like a big corporation like Apple, when they hire someone, it's nothing. It's nothing.
It's less than their garbage bill.
Yeah. And so like, I think the effect of that, or one effect, like I was just sort of thinking, you also have an issue where your various tasks, the various roles or functions of the business are not enough to be a full-time hire, let alone like 2 people or 3 people. In like established big businesses, there's like teams that do each thing. And so clearing that bar of getting to a point where the different functions of the business can occupy maybe it's not one person per task. Maybe it's like
a group.
Three core functions are on one person, and those relate to production, and 3 core functions are another person, and those relate to like bookkeeping and admin and what. Like, But getting to there, it feels like a hard.
It's a steep climb.
It's a steep climb, and I think things get easier. I mean, I'm sure the challenges change, but I think there's certain aspects that seem easier. One of which I think relates to improvements, which is why I bring it up.
I agree. Yeah.
Because like we could have theoretically a team of people who always have bandwidth to manage that core function of improving business functions.
Yeah.
We
or
can't
even
now.
If it's just like, so there's 4 people in my shop right now. If like one person goes offline to do a big improvement project, that's a significant change in what gets done in the shop.
Yeah.
Very significant.
Right. 25% significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And depending on what it is they need to do, it might be, and the knock-on effects it could be significantly larger than that effect, really.
Right.
Because not everybody's just doing their own siloed independent thing. Like whatever that person was going to do feeds into the next person's task.
Yeah.
So it ends up being very, anyway, I've just been kind of like contemplating this, I think especially now because we have a big list of things to tackle that seem like all of a sudden very key.
If you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have priorities.
I mean, they kind of roughly grouped into like 2 priorities.
Okay.
But within those 2, it's like many small projects.
Right.
And they all are going to take a bunch of time and they're all going to take a bunch of money, and we have neither right now.
Right.
Or we have some, obviously, but we don't have a lot of either spare.
Yeah.
And so it all feels like actionable. Like we have clear pathways and necessary.
Interesting.
And yet every day it's like, okay, when are we going to, not today. I guess tomorrow.
Yeah. So leading up, like last quarter, I was sort of aware that this quarter was going to be a bit of a thrash.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. It was hard to sort of convey to Sam and to other people, like, okay, like now is the time to kind of get those big projects. Like that's sort of why I was pushing on Kanban, because like that's largely handled. It's handled for the things we do a lot of, so that's inherently most of the work. But yeah, like when you have Slack, it's sort of easy to just work a little slower or to like not come in or whatever, you know, go deal with life stuff instead of being like, okay, this is the time, you know, all those things we are aware of in the business. Yeah. But still, I mean, there's just so much now. Yeah. Like we improved our shipping station quite a bit. Yeah. But working at it, I'm just like, this is begging for more. I mean, it's like, it's almost worse than it was, because at least before everything had a place, even though it was a bad workflow. Yeah. Now it's sort of like a better workflow, but there's things sort of floating around. Yeah. Not fun.
It's so hard too, once you've seen the pathway and you've like seen the awfulness that you're standing in. It's like, it's like you're in like a pile, like in a, like, you're in a container of sewage and there's a ladder in front of you and your hands are tied behind your back. And you're just like,
that is what it feels like.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Can I climb with just my feet? I don't know. I might fall in.
Yeah. It's kind of brutal. Yeah. Not my favorite.
Anyway,
but
something I've been thinking about.
Yeah. No, it's a good thought. And, at least, I mean, these are all good problems. So
it's true.
There's that. But
I don't remember if I said it on the podcast recently, but someone was asking how business was going. I think it was a family member I hadn't talked to in a while. And I was like, it's going really good. You know, it's like we're growing. It feels like it's a positive direction, but there's a lot of days where I still feel like I'm hanging onto the tail of a tiger. And I think it was my cousin. She was like, well, at least it's a tiger. It could be like a rat.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a very positive outlook.
No, it's true. It's true. Like sometimes I step back and just think of like part of what feels anxiety inducing right now is that I know there's a lot of opportunity out there for other buckles we haven't released, let alone like started
that
developing.
Reminds me, I woke up in the middle of the night, had an idea for you.
Oh, very cool. Like we just don't have the bandwidth, and yet there's like, I keep hearing people being like, hey, when are you going to do this? So I'm like, oh God, like we need to get faster at releasing product. What do I need to do that? Okay, I need to hire. What do I need to do to hire? And it's just like, so every day you kind of wake up with this knowledge of like, there's like 100 things I need to do, and I'm only going to get to 2 of them. But I desperately need to get to all 100. And that's what every day has felt like for the past like month. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, on that positive note, good luck, everyone.
Yeah.
We hope at least some of you make it to task number 4 on your list of 100.
Yeah. That said, to end on an actual positive note, like a big way of, I think, not to be underestimated is just like staying in the game.
Yeah.
I've been listening to this book, The Psychology of Money.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is sort of this idea of compounding.
Yeah.
And to compound and to give yourself the chance to, like, it's also normally a game of long tails, meaning like most of your profit might come from a thing you're not even aware of that your business will do.
Sure.
And you just kind of need to stay in the game long enough to find that.
Yep.
And you can look at business stories, you know, again and again, where it's like at year 7, they did this thing and that turned into 80% of their revenue.
Yeah.
I was just listening to one, I think I mentioned it, Sir Kensington's Mayo.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned it to me.
Yeah, definitely. I forget if it was on the podcast. Yeah. Anyway, they were on How I Built This. It was a really good listen. They launched a ketchup product and then ran that for a few years and then eventually got into mayo. And mayo in like month 1 doubled their revenue. And they recently discontinued the ketchup. It was like they launched into the wrong condiment. You know, classic. And like their theory of the case was right, sort of. It just wasn't with ketchup. It was with mayo.
Interesting.
So anyway, if you're still making the ketchup, you might not be aware of it. Which also gets back to this idea of like not getting feedback on things you don't put out in the world yet.
Yeah.
And it can feel like, oh, well, no one's asking me for this thing, so it must not be that important. I feel that way with like buckle colors and new buckle products.
Yeah.
No one's like, hey, can you do this color? I mean, people do reach out about a new color, but I'm not getting the signal of like, wow, there's a ton of revenue now. Until you release it. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I've been musing recently that like a lot of my, in the job shop world, a lot of my friends that, you know, we've been following each other now for whatever 5-ish plus years.
Yeah.
On Instagram. And we're all like little upstarts in garages. And now like we're in magazines. I mean, not me personally, but like
not yet.
People I know are in magazines, and people I know are doing work for companies that you've heard of.
Right.
And maybe in a not insignificant fashion. And it's just pretty wild to think that like, yeah, if we stick this out, there's going to be a time in not too long from now where some of those legacy companies are going to go away and we're going to be the only option.
Right.
And we better be ready, right, for when those bigger companies come knocking.
Yeah.
And need stuff made.
Yeah. And if you can stay in the game.
Yeah.
Then that is.
Not to say, I mean.
Not to say stay in the game, because you might be in a bad game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like it needs to work, but.
No, I definitely have the other side drilled into my head real hard, which sometimes feels a little unhealthy because like working with startups, most of the startups, you watch these people like burn a lot of money. Yeah. Some of it their own often. Yeah. And like 5 years of their life. And then it's like, yeah, that was just a bad idea. Like, and the fact that you were able to raise on it doesn't mean it was a good idea. Right. And you only found that out 5 years in.
Like you just need to like, all those people should go to a casino prior to any funding round. Oh. Yeah. And just be like, okay, so like you're just dealing with like very high stakes gamblers. Yeah. So look at these people, watch them throw their money away and realize that it doesn't, that these gamblers giving you money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win because you just watch that person throw away like $5,000.
There's also articles on how a fund in that industry, how that works, right? Sure. Like I forget what it is, but it's like 40% lose money, like 10 deals out of 100 break even or cover the fund, and then it's like 1 is your profit.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So you're probably not that one. Yeah. Anyway, but stay in the game, folks. All right.
Right on. Well, you can find me at Lycan_MFG on the gram. LycanPrecision.com on the internet.
And you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com on the internet. And Incremental CI is the podcast on Instagram. And
we have a Patreon.
We do have a Patreon. Go check it out.
Someday we'll all get a beer together or something with it. Thank you everyone for listening. Means the world. And we hope you get a lot of value out of it. We get a lot of value out of doing this.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you soon.